Ruby and Jasmine. I'd chosen their names when I was 16 weeks pregnant, lying in bed one night with Colton's hand spread across my swelling belly. Ruby for your grandmother, I'd whispered. And Jasmine because that's what was blooming outside our window the night you proposed. He'd kissed my forehead, tears in his eyes. They're going to be so loved, Bate. So incredibly loved. But they never got the chance to feel that love, never took a single breath outside my body. The drive to Riverside General took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Colton kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping mine so tightly I could feel my wedding ring pressing into my finger. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? We'd been here before, walked these same sterile hallways, sat in these same uncomfortable chairs. The last time we'd left empty-handed, our arms aching for the weight of babies we'd never hold. Dr. Henrich met us in a small conference room on the 3rd floor, not the maternity ward where I delivered. Thank God for small mercies. A younger woman sat beside her, maybe early 30s, with dark circles under her eyes and a manila folder clutched against her chest like a shield. Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, thank you for coming. Doctor. Henrich gestured to the chairs across from them. This is Sarah Mitchell. She's an investigative journalist who's been looking into some irregularities at this hospital. My stomach dropped. Irregularities? Sarah leaned forward, and I could see her hands trembling slightly. Mrs. Waverly, I've been investigating Dr. Marcus Reeves for the past 18 months. He was the attending physician during your delivery in October 2017, correct? I nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Reeves. I could still picture his face, the way he'd looked at me with what I'd thought was compassion when he told me my babies were gone. I'm so sorry, he'd said, his hand on my shoulder. Sometimes these things just happen. It's not your fault. Dr. Reeves was dismissed from this hospital 14 months ago, Dr. Henrich said, her voice tight. We discovered he'd been falsifying medical records, manipulating patient files, and, she paused, and when she continued, her voice broke slightly. There's evidence suggesting he may have deliberately caused complications in certain deliveries. The room tilted. I felt Colton's arm around me, heard him saying something, but the words came from underwater, distorted and strange. What are you saying? Colton's voice cut through the fog. Are you saying he killed our daughters? Sarah opened the folder, pulled out a stack of papers. We don't know for certain yet, but your case shares similarities with 7 others we've identified. All twin pregnancies, all healthy until the delivery, all ending in stillbirth or neonatal death within hours, and all attended by Dr. Reeves. 7 others. 7 families like ours destroyed. Why, the word ripped out of me, why would anyone do that? Dr. Henrich's face was ashen. We're still piecing it together, but it appears Dr. Reeves was conducting some kind of unauthorized research. We found records hidden in his office after his termination. Notes about twin development, genetic markers, stem cell extraction from umbilical cords. He was stealing from dead babies. Colton's voice rose, and I'd never heard him sound like that before. Dangerous and barely controlled. We believe so, yes. He was selling biological material to private research facilities. The preliminary investigation suggests he may have been inducing premature labor or creating complications that would result in... Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. My daughters hadn't died because my body failed them. They died because a monster in a white coat had murdered them for profit. I stood up so fast the chair toppled backward. The room spun, and suddenly I was bent over, vomiting into the trash. Dr. Henrich quickly pushed toward me. Colton's hand rubbed circles on my back, and I could hear him crying, these awful broken sounds that made everything worse. Mrs. Waverly, I know this is devastating, Sarah said softly. But we need your help. We need to exhume your daughter's bodies for autopsy. We need to prove what he did so he can be prosecuted. Right now, he's only facing charges for fraud and practicing without proper oversight. But if we can prove he deliberately caused these deaths, he'll go to prison for murder, Colton finished, his voice hollow. I wiped my mouth with the tissue. Doctor Henrich handed me, tasted bile and coffee and the bitter flavor of rage. You want to dig up my babies? I know it's an unbearable request, Sarah said, but there are 7 other families, Mrs. Waverly, maybe more we haven't found yet. You could help stop this from destroying anyone else. I thought about the grave Colton, and I visited every Sunday after church. The small pink headstone with 2 names and the same date for birth and death. Together in our hearts forever, the inscription read. We'd planted jasmine around it, and every spring the flowers bloomed, filling the air with sweetness. Now someone wanted to tear into that earth, pull my daughters from their rest, cut into their tiny, perfect bodies to prove what a monster had done. I need time, I whispered. We don't have much time, Sarah pressed. Dr. Reeves knows we're building a case. His lawyers are already trying to get evidence suppressed. Every day we wait. I said I need time. The shout came from somewhere deep inside me, somewhere I didn't recognize. Those are my children you want to carve up like specimens. I've spent 7 years trying to give them peace, and now you want me to destroy that? Dr. Henrich stood. Mrs. Waverly, I understand this is overwhelming. Take 24 hours, think about it. Discuss it with your husband, but please understand that this might be the only way to get justice for Ruby and Jasmine. Justice. What did that even mean? Would putting Dr. Reeves in prison bring my daughters back? Would it erase 7 years of grief, of blaming myself, of my mother-in-law's cruel words echoing in my head? Would it give me back the mother I was supposed to be? 38 Colton drove us home in silence. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. We'd been together since we were 17 years old, 15 years of knowing each other's moods, each other's breaking points. Right now, he was holding himself together with sheer force of will, and I knew if I said one word, he'd shatter. So I stayed quiet and watched the familiar streets of our town blur past. Madison Street, where our shop sat dark and closed on a Tuesday morning for the first time in 5 years. The elementary school, where I'd imagined dropping Ruby and Jasmine off for their first day of kindergarten. The park where I couldn't walk anymore because seeing the twins swing side by side made my chest ache. When we pulled into our driveway, Colton turned off the engine but didn't move. Just sat there, staring straight ahead at our little blue house with the white shutters I'd painted last summer. My mother knew, he said finally, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear him. What? That night at the hospital, when Mom said that to you about not being able to carry babies properly. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were red-rimmed. I heard her bait. I was standing right there, and I heard what she said to you, and I didn't defend you. I couldn't function. I couldn't think about anything except that our girls were gone. Colton, let me finish. He took a shaky breath. I've regretted that silence every single day for 7 years, and when Dr. Reeves told us it was just one of those things that happen, that sometimes twins don't make it and nobody's to blame. My mother looked at you like he was lying. Like she knew it was your fault somehow. And I think, God, Bate, I think maybe she knew something was wrong even then. She's a nurse. She worked in obstetrics for 30 years before she retired. What if she suspected something and didn't say anything? The thought hit me like a physical blow. Francine Waverly, with her cold eyes and colder words, had been in labor and delivery nurse at 3 different hospitals over her career. She'd seen thousands of births, thousands of complications. What if she had known? We need to talk to her, I said. Colton's laugh was bitter. We haven't spoken to my mother in 4 years, Bate. Not since she told you at Christmas dinner that it was God's will that we couldn't have children because some people aren't meant to be parents. I remembered that night. The way the whole table had gone silent. Colton's father muttering, Francine, that's enough, while his sister Melissa started crying. The sound of my fork clattering onto my plate before I walked out of their house and sat in the car for 20 minutes, shaking. Colton had followed me out, and we'd driven home without saying goodbye to anyone. He'd called his mother the next day and told her she wasn't welcome in our lives until she apologized. 4 years later, we were still waiting. She might have information that could help the investigation, I said. Information about Dr. Reeves about what happened that night. And you think she'd tell us, the woman who spent 7 years blaming you for something that wasn't your fault? Colton shook his head. She'll probably say we're disrespecting the dead by even considering the exhumation. Then we don't tell her about that part yet. We ask her about Dr. Reeves. Whether she knew him, whether she ever heard anything strange about his practices. I reached for Colton's hand. Baby, if there's even a chance she knows something that could help catch this monster, don't we have to try? He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm calling her. And if she says one cruel thing to you, Bate, I swear to God I'm hanging up. We went inside, and Colton pulled out his phone. I watched him stare at his mother's contact information for a full minute before he finally pressed call. He put it on speaker. It rang 4 times before she answered. Colton. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, sharp, clipped, the accent from her Boston childhood never fully buried. Is something wrong? Mom, I need to ask you about something. He looked at me, and I nodded encouragement. Do you remember Dr. Marcus Reeves? He was the attending physician when Bate delivered the twins. Silence, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Mom. You there? I remember him. Her voice had changed, gone flat and careful. Why are you asking about him now? There's an investigation into his practices. They think he might have been deliberately causing complications during deliveries. Colton's hand found mine, squeezed. They think he might have killed our daughters, Mom. Another long silence. Then I need to see you both, in person, not over the phone. My heart started racing. Francine, do you know something? Bethany. It was the first time she'd said my name in 4 years. Don't say anything else on the phone. Come to my house. Tonight, 6 o'clock, and don't tell anyone you're coming to see me. The line went dead. Colton and I stared at each other. What the hell was that? He whispered. She knows something. My voice was shaking. Colton, your mother knows something about what happened to our babies. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Colton called Jake to say we'd be out for a few more days. Family emergency, please handle the shop. I tried to bake my usual coping mechanism, but burned 2 batches of muffins because I couldn't focus on anything except the clock. 6 o'clock, 4 hours away, 3 hours, 2. We should eat something, Colton said around 4:30, but neither of us could stomach food. At 5:15, we got in the truck. Francine lived 40 minutes outside of town, in the same farmhouse where Colton had grown up. His father had died 2 years ago, heart attack while fixing the barn roof, and she'd stayed out there alone, refusing all suggestions that she move somewhere smaller, somewhere with neighbors close by. Francine Waverly doesn't need neighbors, she'd told Melissa. I've got my garden and my books and my memories. That's enough. The drive took us through farmland, past fields going brown in the October evening. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red that reminded me too much of the leaves that had been falling the day my daughters died. Colton's childhood home appeared around a bend in the road, a white 2-story farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a red barn out back. Francine's car was in the driveway, but there was another vehicle parked beside it, a silver sedan I didn't recognize. She said not to tell anyone we were coming, I murmured. So who's that? Colton's jaw tightened. Only one way to find out. We climbed the porch steps, and before Colton could knock, the door opened. Francine stood there, smaller than I remembered, her hair more gray than brown now. She wore a cardigan despite the warmth of the evening, and her hands trembled slightly as she gestured us inside. Living room, she said. We're in the living room. We. I followed Colton through the familiar hallway, past photos of him and Melissa as children, past the grandfather clock that had always chimed too loudly. The living room was exactly as I remembered, floral couch, stone fireplace, braided rug, but there was a woman sitting in the armchair by the window. She was maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and the posture of someone who'd spent decades in authority. When she stood, I saw she was wearing scrubs under an open jacket. Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, she said. My name is Linda Patterson. I was the head nurse in the maternity ward at Riverside General from 1995 until my retirement last year. She glanced at Francine. And I was Francine's supervisor for 10 of those years. 1740, sit down, Francine said, and it wasn't her usual commanding tone. She sounded tired, almost defeated. Both of you. What Linda has to say, you'll want to be sitting. Colton and I settled onto the floral couch, pressed close together. I could feel him trembling, or maybe that was me. Maybe it was both of us. Linda Patterson sat back down in the armchair, folded her hands in her lap with the practiced calm of someone about to deliver terrible news. I'd seen that posture before, from doctors and nurses and the funeral director who'd helped us plan services for babies who'd never lived. I need to start by saying that I've carried guilt about this for 7 years, Linda began. When Francine called me this afternoon and told me about the investigation, I knew it was time to stop being a coward. Time to tell the truth, even if it costs me everything. What truth? Colton's voice was hoarse. I was on duty the night you delivered, Mrs. Waverly. October 15, 2017. I was the one who assisted Dr. Reeves during your emergency C-section. Linda's eyes were bright with unshed tears, and I saw what he did. The room tilted. I gripped Colton's hand so hard I felt his bones shift. Your pregnancy was progressing normally, Linda continued. All the monitors showed both babies were healthy, good heart rates, no distress. You were at 36 weeks, which is considered full term for twins. There was no medical reason for intervention that night. But I started bleeding, I whispered. I remember the blood, so much blood, and the pain. Dr. Reeves induced the hemorrhage, Linda said flatly. He injected something into your IV around midnight. I saw him do it. 30 minutes later, you started bleeding. He declared it a placental abruption, said we needed to get the babies out immediately or you'd all die. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking me. I questioned him, Linda said. Asked what he'd put in the IV. He told me it was magnesium sulfate for preeclampsia prevention, but you weren't showing any signs of preeclampsia. Your blood pressure was perfect. I checked your chart. There was no order for magnesium sulfate. Why didn't you stop him? Colton's voice was deadly quiet. I tried. I went to the charge nurse, told her I thought Dr. Reeves had done something wrong. She said I was mistaken, that I was new to night shift and probably confused about what I'd seen. Dr. Reeves was a respected physician. I was a nurse with 2 years of experience. Who do you think they believed? So you just let it happen, I said, and the words tasted like ashes. You watched him murder my babies and did nothing. No, Francine's voice cut through the room. She tried to save them. Tell them, Linda. Tell them what you did. Linda's hands were shaking now. During the surgery, I documented everything. Every medication, every instrument used, every decision Dr. Reeves made. The babies were alive when he delivered them. I heard them cry, both of them, these tiny, perfect sounds. But he said they were too premature. That their lungs weren't developed enough despite being 36 weeks. They were alive. The question came out as a sob. My babies were alive. For about 45 seconds. Then Dr. Reeves took them to the warming station, said he was checking their airways. I couldn't see exactly what he did. He positioned himself to block my view, but when he stepped back, they'd stopped breathing. He called it respiratory distress, said it was common in premature twins, that sometimes nature is cruel. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could see was my daughters, crying for the first and last time, while a monster in scrubs did something to silence them forever. I filed a report, Linda said. A formal incident report with the hospital administration. I documented my concerns about the unauthorized IV medication, about the suspicious timing of the hemorrhage, about how the babies had been alive and then weren't. I turned it in to my supervisor the next morning. And, Colton demanded, it disappeared, never made it to the board review. When I followed up 2 weeks later, my supervisor said there was no record of any report. She suggested I was experiencing stress, maybe needed some time off to deal with the trauma of a difficult delivery. Linda's voice broke. I was 28 years old, in debt from nursing school, supporting my mother who had Alzheimer's. I couldn't afford to lose my job, so I stayed quiet. And I've hated myself every single day since. You should hate yourself, I said coldly. You let him get away with it. You let him kill 7 more sets of twins because you were worried about your job. Bait, Colton started, but I shook my head. No, don't defend her. She could have gone to the police, to the medical board, to the newspapers. She could have done something, anything, but instead she just kept showing up for work, probably assisted in more of his deliveries. Watched more babies die. I quit 3 months later, Linda interrupted. Transferred to a different hospital, different department. I couldn't work in maternity anymore, couldn't watch doctor. Reeves walked those halls like he was God's gift to medicine when I knew what he really was. She wiped her eyes, and I kept copies of everything. The documentation from your surgery, my incident report, photos I took of the medications he used. I've had them in a safe deposit box for 7 years, waiting for the day when someone would finally believe me. Francine stood, walked to an end table, and pulled out a thick envelope. Linda brought these today. Hospital records, medication logs, witness statements from other nurses who saw Reeves doing suspicious things but were too afraid to speak up. She looked at me directly for the first time. Bethany, I worked with Marcus Reeves for 8 years before I retired. I knew he was dirty. I knew he was hurting people. And when you went into labor that night, when Colton called to tell me you were at Riverside General and Doctor. Reeves was your attending. I should have told you to leave, to go to any other hospital, anywhere but there. Why didn't you? The question came out broken. Because I'm a coward, Francine said simply. Because I'd spent 8 years watching him operate, seeing him do things that didn't feel right, but never quite having proof. And I told myself that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just a bitter old woman who resented that the young hotshot doctor got all the praise while nurses did all the real work. She walked closer. And I saw tears on her face. When your babies died, when I saw you lying in that hospital bed destroyed by grief, I knew. I knew in my bones that Reeves had done something to cause it. But I couldn't prove it, and I couldn't bear to give you false hope by voicing my suspicions. So instead you blamed me, I said. You told me I couldn't carry babies properly, that I wasn't meant to be a mother. I was trying to hurt you enough that you'd leave my son, Francine whispered. I thought if you divorced Colton, he could start over with someone else, have children with a woman who hadn't been touched by Reeves's evil. I thought I was protecting him. Jesus Christ, Mom, Colton started to stand, but I held him back. You destroyed me, I told Francine. Every cruel word, every look of disgust, every time you made me feel like I'd murdered my own children, you destroyed me. And you did it because you were trying to protect Colton from having a wife who'd been victimized by a serial killer in a white coat. I was wrong, Francine said. I've been wrong about so many things, but I'm trying to make it right now. Linda and we've been in contact with Sarah Mitchell for 3 weeks. We've given her everything, all the documentation, all the witness statements, names of other nurses who saw suspicious deaths. The district attorney is building a case that could put Reeves away for life, but they need the autopsy results to prove cause of death. She knelt down in front of me. This proud woman who'd never shown weakness, and took my hands in hers. Bethany, I am begging you to let them exhume Ruby and Jasmine, not for justice, justice won't bring them back, but for the other mothers. For the women who are pregnant right now, who might end up with Marcus Reeves in their delivery room if he gets away with this. For every twin pregnancy that should end in joy but might end in murder if we don't stop him. I looked at this woman who'd made my life hell for 7 years. Who'd blamed me for a crime I didn't commit, who'd let me drown in guilt rather than throw me a rope of truth. I need to talk to Colton, I said. Alone. 17:42 we walked out to the porch, leaving Francine and Linda in the living room. The sun had set completely now, and the October air was cold enough to make me shiver. Colton pulled off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders without a word. For a long time, we just stood there, looking out at the dark fields. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. The wind rustled through the trees, making the leaves whisper like secrets. "They cried," I finally said. "Our babies cried, Colton, they were alive." He made a sound like something breaking. "I know. All this time I thought they were born asleep. Dead before they ever had a chance, but they were alive, and he killed them while they were breathing, while they were real." I turned to look at my husband. "Do you understand what that means?" For 45 seconds, we were parents. For 45 seconds, Ruby and Jasmine were alive in this world, and we didn't even know it. "Bait, I want to hear them," I said. "I want to know what they sounded like. Their cries. There must be recordings, right? Hospital rooms have cameras, audio equipment. I want to hear my daughter's voices." Colton pulled me against him, and we stood there wrapped together, both of us crying in the darkness. His tears soaked into my hair, and mine disappeared into his shirt, and I thought about how grief was supposed to get easier with time, but sometimes it just learned to hide better. "My mother knew," he said after a while. "She suspected the truth, and instead of helping us, she made you feel like a failure." "Bait, I don't know if I can forgive her for that. I don't know if I can either," I admitted, "but she's trying to help now." And Linda, God, I wanted to hate her so much for staying silent, but she was just a kid, barely out of school. Trying to survive in a system designed to protect doctors over everyone else. Does that excuse it? No. But it explains it. I pulled back to look at him. "Colton, if we do this, if we let them dig up our babies, we have to be prepared for what they might find." Linda said she saw Reeves do something at the warming station, but she doesn't know what. "The autopsy might show that he smothered them, or injected them with something, or—" "Stop," Colton said roughly. "Don't. I can't think about the details or I'll lose my mind. We have to think about the details. We have to decide if we're strong enough to hear them." I took his hands. "Baby, for 7 years we've been living with the story that our daughters just didn't make it, that it was tragic but natural. If we open this door, we're choosing to know exactly how they were murdered. We're choosing to carry that knowledge for the rest of our lives." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, do you remember what you said to me the night we buried them?" I shook my head. "We were standing at the grave after everyone else had left. It was raining, and the funeral director kept trying to get us to come inside, but you wouldn't leave. You just stood there in the rain, staring at their coffin, and you said, 'I promise you'll matter. I promise your lives will mean something, even if they were only 40 weeks long.'" He cupped my face. "You were wrong about the timeline. They were alive for 45 seconds, not just the pregnancy, but you were right about the promise. Bait, this is how we make their lives matter. This is how we keep that promise. By letting strangers cut them open, by making sure the man who killed them can't hurt anyone else." Colton's voice was fierce. "By making sure Ruby and Jasmine's names are attached to justice, not just tragedy. By giving other mothers a chance we didn't get." I thought about the 7 other families Sarah Mitchell had mentioned. 7 other couples who'd lost twins, who'd been told it was just bad luck, just one of those things that happen. 7 other mothers who probably blamed themselves, who probably heard cruel voices in their heads saying they weren't good enough, strong enough, woman enough to keep their babies alive. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, we'll do it." Colton kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. "Are you sure?" "No. But I'm sure that I can't live with myself if we don't at least try." I took a shaky breath. "Let's go tell them." We walked back inside to find Francine and Linda sitting in silence. They both looked up when we entered, and I could see the fear in their faces. Fear that we'd say no, that all their guilt and confessions would be for nothing. "We'll agree to the exhumation," I said. "On 3 conditions," Francine nodded. "Anything. 1, I want every piece of documentation, every photo, every recording from that night. If there's audio of my daughters crying, I want it. If there are cameras that caught what Reeves did, I want to see the footage. I need to know everything." "I'll make sure you get it," Linda said. 2, when this goes to trial, I want to testify. I want to look Marcus Reeves in the eye and tell him exactly what he took from us. I want him to hear my daughter's names from my mouth. The prosecutor will want your testimony, Linda assured me. You'll have that chance. 3. I looked directly at Francine. You need to apologize, not just to me but to Colton. You need to own what you did, how you hurt us, and you need to mean it. Because Colton wants a relationship with his mother, he's always wanted that, but I won't let you back into our lives if all you bring is more pain. Francine's face crumpled. She crossed the room and stood in front of us, this woman who'd always seemed so tall and imposing, now looking small and old. Colton, I am so deeply sorry. I blamed Bethany because I couldn't face the possibility that I'd worked alongside a monster for 8 years and done nothing. I told myself she was weak, that she was wrong for you, because admitting the truth would have meant admitting my own cowardice. She turned to me. Bethany, you have been a good wife to my son. You've been strong and brave and kind, even when I was cruel. You didn't fail your daughters. I failed you, and I failed them, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that. I wanted to stay angry. God, I wanted to hold on to that rage, to make her suffer the way she'd made me suffer. But I was so tired of carrying hate. It was heavy, and I'd been carrying grief for 7 years already. I didn't have room for both. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said honestly, but I'm willing to try. For Colton's sake, and for the sake of maybe having some family left when this is all over. Francine nodded, tears streaming down her face. That's more than I deserve. Way more, Colton agreed, his voice hard. Mom, I love you, but if you ever speak to Bate the way you did at that Christmas dinner, or the way you did at the hospital, we're done. Permanently. Do you understand? I understand. Linda stood, gathering the envelope of documents. I should go, give you all some privacy, but Mrs. Waverly, Bate, I want you to know that I've never stopped thinking about your daughters. I've never stopped regretting that I didn't do more. When this goes to trial, I'll testify to everything I saw, even if it costs me my nursing license. It probably will, I said quietly. Admitting you falsified records, that you knew about the incident report disappearing and didn't pursue it, the medical board won't look kindly on that. I know. But some things are more important than a career. She handed me the envelope. These are copies. The originals are with Sarah Mitchell and the DA's office. There are photos in there of your daughters from right after delivery, before Reeves took them. I thought you might want them. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Thank you. After Linda left, Francine made coffee, and we sat around her kitchen table like we used to do years ago, before everything fell apart. It was strange and uncomfortable and necessary, all at the same time. The exhumation will take a few weeks to arrange, Francine said. Legal paperwork, permits, coordinating with the medical examiner. Sarah Mitchell said she'd handle most of it, but you'll need to sign consent forms. How do we tell people? Colton asked. Our friends, the folks at the shop, Melissa, everyone's going to want to know why we're suddenly digging up the twins' grave. We tell them the truth, I said, or as much of it as we can. That new evidence has come to light about medical malpractice, that we're cooperating with an investigation. Melissa will want to help, Francine said. She's always felt guilty that she didn't stand up to me more, didn't defend you better. Colton nodded. I'll call her tomorrow. She deserves to know what's happening before the gossip starts. We talked for another hour, making plans, discussing logistics, avoiding the elephant in the room, the fact that in a few weeks, our daughters' tiny bodies would be pulled from the earth and examined by strangers. 17:43, it was nearly midnight when we finally left Francine's house. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled into our driveway, I saw that someone had left a basket on our porch, probably one of the neighbors, worried because the shop had been closed all day. Inside were fresh bread, a casserole, and a note from Mrs. Chen next door. Saw your shop was closed. Hope everything's okay. Love and prayers. I started crying again, these silent tears that just wouldn't stop. Colton found me on the porch, clutching the basket, and he sat down beside me. People are good, I said. Even when the world is terrible, people are good. We went inside, and I finally opened the envelope Linda had given me. Colton sat beside me on the couch as I pulled out the documents with shaking hands. Medical charts, medication logs, handwritten notes in Linda's precise script documenting every suspicious thing she'd witnessed. And then, at the bottom, 3 photographs, my daughters. Ruby and Jasmine, minutes old, lying on a warming table. They were tiny, barely 5 pounds each, but perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, rosebud mouths and eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights of the delivery room. Ruby had a small birthmark on her left shoulder, shaped like a heart. Jasmine had a wisp of dark hair just like mine. They looked like they were sleeping. "They're beautiful," Colton whispered, touching the photo with one finger. "God bait, they're so beautiful." I traced the outline of Ruby's face, then Jasmine's. These were my daughters, real, whole, perfect. Not the grainy ultrasound image I'd carried in my wallet for 7 years, but actual photographs of actual babies who'd actually existed in the world. "I want to frame these," I said. "I want them on our mantle where we can see them every day. I want people to know they were real." "We'll do that," Colton promised. "We'll make them the biggest, most beautiful frames we can find." We stayed up until 3 in the morning, looking through the documents, reading Linda's notes, studying every detail of what had happened that night. It was painful, God, it was excruciating, but it was also necessary. We needed to know. We needed to understand exactly what had been stolen from us. The next morning, Colton called Melissa while I called Sarah Mitchell. "We'll sign whatever papers you need," I told her. "We're ready to move forward." "I can't imagine how difficult this is," Sarah said gently, "but I want you to know that the case against Reeves is getting stronger every day. 3 more families have come forward since we last spoke. We're up to 10 sets of twins now, all with the same pattern of suspicious deaths. 10 families destroyed by one man's greed. When will the exhumation happen?" The judge fast-tracked our petition. "We're looking at next Wednesday, early morning before the cemetery opens to the public." "You don't have to be there. In fact, most families prefer not to witness it, but if you want to be present, that's your right." I looked at Colton, who nodded. "We'll be there," I said. "We need to be there." The week that followed was the longest of my life. Melissa came over every day, bringing food and tissues and her steady, comforting presence. She'd always been closer to me than to Francine, and now she made it clear whose side she was on. "I should have said something years ago," she told me, crying into her coffee. "When Mom said those horrible things to you, I should have stood up and told her she was wrong. But I was scared of her, just like everyone else was." "You were just a kid," I reminded her. She'd been only 21 when the twins died. "I was old enough to know right from wrong. I failed you, Bate. But I'm not going to fail you now." True to her word, Melissa became our shield against the outside world. When people from town started asking questions about why the shop was still closed, she ran interference. When reporters somehow got wind of the investigation and started calling, she told them firmly that the family had no comment. When Francine called wanting to come over, Melissa gently told her mother to give us space. We spent our evenings with the photographs of Ruby and Jasmine, talking to them like they could hear us. "Your daddy's scared," I told them one night, while Colton was in the shower. "He's scared of what we're going to find out, scared that knowing the details will break him. But he's also the bravest man I know, and he's doing this for you. We both are." Tuesday night, the evening before the exhumation, neither of us could sleep. We lay in bed holding each other, watching the hours tick by on the alarm clock. "What if I can't handle it?" Colton whispered. "What if I see them bring up the coffin and I just break? Then you break and I'll hold you together," I said. "And if I break, you'll hold me. That's what we do. I love you, Bate. I need you to know that. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever we find out, I love you and I have never once blamed you for losing them." "I know," I said, and realized it was true. Despite all of Francine's poison, despite 7 years of guilt, I'd always known in my heart that Colton loved me completely. "I love you too." Wednesday morning arrived cold and gray, the sky threatening rain. We met Sarah Mitchell and Linda Patterson at the cemetery gates at 6 a.m. The medical examiner's van was already there, along with 2 workers from the cemetery, and a priest Francine had asked to be present. Francine herself stood by the grave, wrapped in a black coat, looking 10 years older than she had just a week ago. When she saw us, she didn't approach, just nodded acknowledgement and stepped back to give us space. The headstone was exactly as I remembered it. Pink granite with white lettering. Ruby Elizabeth WAVRLY, Jasmine MARIE WAVRLY, October 15, 2017, together in our hearts, forever. The jasmine we'd planted had gone dormant for winter. But you could see where it would bloom come spring. Mr. and Mrs. Waverly, the medical examiner said, approaching carefully, I want you to understand what's going to happen. We'll remove the earth as carefully as possible, then lift the coffin and transport it to the county facility. The autopsy will take approximately 3 days. We'll treat your daughters with the utmost respect and dignity. Will we get them back? I asked. After, yes. Once the autopsy is complete and evidence is collected, you can reinter them here or choose a different location if you prefer. Colton's hand found mine. Let's do this. The workers began their task. It was quiet except for the sound of shovels biting into earth, the soft voices of men trying to be respectful while doing an impossible job. I watched the pile of dirt grow, watched them dig deeper and deeper, and tried not to think about what came next. After 40 minutes, one of the workers called out softly. We've reached the vault. My legs almost gave out. Colton's arm came around my waist, holding me upright. They rigged straps around the burial vault, then used a small crane to lift it. The pink coffin inside was so small, barely 3 feet long, big enough for 2 tiny babies who'd never had a chance to grow. Oh God, I heard Francine sob behind us. Oh, my sweet girls. The priest began praying in Latin, his voice steady and calm. The workers loaded the coffin into the medical examiner's van with such gentleness, such care, that I started crying again. We'll call you as soon as we have preliminary findings, Sarah promised. I know this is agonizing, but you're doing the right thing. As the van drove away, carrying my daughters to be examined and photographed and cut open in the name of justice, I turned to look at the open grave. The hole in the earth was dark and empty, just like the hole in my heart had been for 7 years. But this time, I knew the truth. This time, I knew my babies hadn't died because I was weak or broken or wrong. They'd died because a monster had killed them, and that monster was going to pay. Let's go home, Colton said quietly. We walked back to the truck, Melissa and Francine following at a distance. As we drove away, I looked back at the cemetery one last time and made a silent promise to Ruby and Jasmine. This isn't over. Your story isn't over. You mattered, you lived, you were loved, and the world is going to know your names. I promise. Epilogue 3 weeks later, I stood in a packed courtroom wearing my best black dress, and the locket Colton had given me for our 10th anniversary. Inside were the photos of Ruby and Jasmine from the delivery room, the only pictures I'd ever have of my daughters. The autopsy results had been devastating and conclusive. Both babies had died from injection of concentrated potassium chloride directly into their tiny hearts. The medical examiner said death would have been nearly instantaneous. They'd cried for 45 seconds, and then Dr. Marcus Reeves had murdered them with a syringe. The DA had charged him with 20 counts of first-degree murder, 10 sets of twins over 8 years, plus fraud, conspiracy, and illegal trafficking of biological materials. The evidence was overwhelming. Linda Patterson's documentation, combined with the autopsy results and testimony from 12 other families, built a case that even Reeves's expensive lawyers couldn't crack. Now it was my turn to speak. Mrs. Waverly, the prosecutor said gently, can you tell the court about your daughters? I looked at Marcus Reeves sitting at the defense table. He was 53, handsome in a silver fox way, with the kind of smile that probably made patients trust him. He wouldn't look at me. Ruby Elizabeth and Jasmine Marie Waverly were born on October 15, 2017, at 2:47 a.m., I said, my voice steady. They weighed 4 pounds 11 ounces and 5 pounds 2 ounces. Ruby had a birthmark shaped like a heart on her left shoulder. Jasmine had dark hair like mine. They were perfect. I pulled out the photographs and held them up so the jury could see. They cried when they were born. Did you know that? For 45 seconds, my daughters were alive in this world. They breathed air and felt warmth and made sounds that only I should remember, but I never got to hear because that man. I pointed at Reeves. That man murdered them before anyone even told me they'd been born alive. Reeves finally looked at me, and there was nothing in his eyes. No remorse, no guilt, just cold calculation. He killed them for money, I continued. For stem cells and tissue samples he could sell to research companies. He turned my babies into commodities, into products, into things instead of people. And then he looked me in the eye and told me it wasn't my fault, that sometimes these things just happen, while I blamed myself for 7 years. My voice broke, but I pushed through. Ruby and Jasmine never got to blow out birthday candles, or lose their first tooth, or learn to ride a bike. They never got to be flower girls at their Aunt Melissa's wedding, or help their daddy fix cars, or taste my blueberry muffins. They never got to exist beyond those 45 seconds because a man in a position of trust decided their lives were worth less than his bank account. I looked directly at Reeves. But they mattered. They lived and they were loved, and their names will be remembered long after yours is forgot. Ruby Elizabeth Waverly, Jasmine Marie Waverly, my daughters. And you will never take them from me again. The courtroom was silent when I sat down. Colton took my hand, tears streaming down his face. In the gallery, I could see Francine and Melissa and Linda Patterson, all crying. Even the judge had to take a moment to compose herself. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Marcus Reeves was convicted on all 20 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and sad and grateful that it was finally over. Justice wouldn't bring my daughters back. But it would protect other mothers from the same fate. As we left the courthouse, reporters crowded around us. Colton put his arm around me and we pushed through toward our truck. But then I stopped and turned back to the cameras. I have something I want to say, I told them. The cameras focused. Reporters raised their microphones. If you're pregnant or planning to be, please advocate for yourself. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion if something feels wrong. Trust your instincts. I took a breath. And know that if something does go wrong, if you lose a baby or have complications, it's not always your fault. Sometimes there are monsters hiding in hospitals. Sometimes the people we trust betray us, but that doesn't make you weak or broken or less of a woman. It makes you a victim of someone else's crime. What will you do now? One reporter called out. I looked at Colton, at his strong, kind face that had been my anchor through 7 years of hell and 3 weeks of revelations. We're going to live, I said simply. We're going to honor our daughters by living the best lives we can. And we're going to make sure Ruby and Jasmine's story helps protect other families from predators like Marcus Reeves. 6 months later, Colton and I stood in front of a new building on the edge of town. The sign above the door read, Ruby and Jasmine's Safe Haven. Support Center for Families Affected by Medical Malpractice and Infant Loss. We'd used the settlement money from the hospital. Riverside General had paid out millions to avoid further litigation, to create a place where families could get counseling, legal support, and advocacy services. Linda Patterson ran our medical oversight program, helping families identify red flags and navigate the healthcare system. Melissa managed the support groups. Francine volunteered in the resource library, and I baked. Every morning, I filled the building with the smell of fresh muffins and coffee, creating a warm space where grieving parents could come and know they weren't alone. Ready? Colton asked, his hand on the door. Ready, I said. We opened the doors to Ruby and Jasmine's safe haven, and families started arriving, mothers who'd lost babies. fathers who didn't know how to process their grief, couples trying to hold their marriages together after tragedy. People who needed to know that sometimes terrible things happen, but you can survive them. You can even find purpose in them. That night, Colton and I visited the cemetery. We'd replanted the grave with fresh jasmine, and the headstone now included a new inscription below the original. Their lives, though brief, changed the world. 20 families saved. Countless more protected. Forever in our hearts, forever making a difference. I placed fresh flowers on the grave and whispered, "We kept our promise, babies. You mattered. You still matter. And you always will." Colton pulled me close, and we stood there in the fading light, two people who'd survived the worst thing imaginable and somehow found a way to turn tragedy into purpose. Grief into action, loss into love. Our daughters' names would live on, not as victims, but as catalysts for change. Ruby Elizabeth Waverly, Jasmine Marie Waverly, gone but never forgotten, loved always, the end.